Hey, today we get to look at my favorite form of writing, which is the Wall Street Journal technique. I love using this technique because it emphasizes the human interest angle of a story. The Wall Street Journal is a business publication that writes about stocks and options and numbers all the time. But instead of starting every story with a summary lead and a lot of numbers in it, they decide to focus on the human angle. And many of their stories start with what's called an anecdotal lead or a story lead. You learned about these when you talked about the delayed leads a few weeks ago, but here you get to really put it in action and apply it. Let's say a company plans to lay off 10% of their workforce. You could do a summary lead saying that XYZ company will lay off 10% of its workforce in a move to cut costs and improve profitability. Instead, why don't you find someone who's being laid off, maybe someone who's worked at the company for a number of years, and do a sort of introduction to the story that focuses on this particular person, cleaning out his or her desk, or talking about the day he or she was hired, or something like that. And then go into the nut graph. We've talked about that before, where the nut graph explains that this person is just one of 312 that are being let go at XYZ company this year because of cost cutting. So again, starting a summary lead, that's okay. Wall Street Journal technique focuses on the human interest angle. This one also includes the nut graph, and we're also going to talk about the kiss-off. This is where you take a person that you've interviewed, you use the information from that person, and then you kiss that person off, and you never use them again in the story. So let's take a look at a Wall Street Journal technique lead and sort of take it apart and see how it works. This story is from the New York Times, even though it's a Wall Street Journal technique story. But if you look at the beginning of it, it talks about hundreds of students sitting on a bus, punching each other, doing all sorts of things that students do on a bus. But then it takes you to a particular morning as this bus, number 92, rolls down a mountain highway. And what's going on the bus is John O'Connell, a junior at Empire High School, is pecking feverishly at his MacBook. He's touching up an essay. Another student across the aisle is emailing her friend Patrick to meet her at the bus park in half an hour. Another student, Kyle, is awaiting acknowledgement from a teacher that he has just turned in his biology homework electronically. Got it, thanks, comes the reply from Michael Frank, Kyle's teacher. So you've got almost like a roundup lead here, focusing on 3 different individuals explaining what's going on. And then the news story really starts down here where it says, internet buses may soon be hauling children to school in many other districts. Right. That's the nut graph. Right. It ties in the students that we just talked about earlier in the story with the news element, the time element, which is in the nut graph. The kiss-off becomes extremely important in this story. So you're going to bring a source into the story, use his or her information, and then get rid of her. So if you go on later in the story, talk to Karen Cater, who is the Director of Educational Technology at the Federal Department of Education. Spend a little time talking about what she has to say. Then we move on and talk about Matt Federoff, who is the school district's Chief Information Officer. We spend a few paragraphs talking about what he has to say. Include a quote from him and some other things like that. Then we bring in a sophomore who is the team manager, and what she has to say about using the laptop on her bus. And then we go back to Bingham. And we bring in some other students, Dylan Powell, Jared Rees, Calvin Baker, superintendent. And then we bring in another student at the end. So we bring people in, we use the information that he or she provides, and then we kiss them off. Right? The only time you want to bring somebody back is maybe you want to use somebody at the beginning. So let's go back to that XYZ company laying off somebody. So you start with Sally Smith, who's been with the company for 25 years, and she cleans out her desk. Then you go into the body of the story and talk about why they're laying people off, how many people they're laying off, maybe talk to some other people that they've let go, maybe talk to management to find out why they're letting all these people go. And then maybe you come back to Sally at the end as she cleans out her desk and is escorted out the door to the waiting hands of her husband who's driving her home that day. Okay? So the kiss-off works really well in the story. The only time you want to bring someone back is maybe at the beginning of the story and then bring it back at the end.